On February 6, in the year 1685, the Palace of Whitehall is gripped by panic. In the royal bedchamber, Charles II, King of England, is agonizing on his deathbed, surrounded by desperate physicians attempting to save his life. But this is not just any king dying. This is the man who transformed the English court into the grandest brothel in Europe, who possessed more mistresses than any monarch in history, and who left a trail of illegitimate children scattered throughout the entire kingdom. At 54 years of age, Charles is paying the price for decades of unrestrained carnal excess. His final words are not about God or his kingdom, but a desperate plea. "Let not poor Nellie starve," a reference to Nell Gwyn, one of his many lovers. Thus ends the life of the most libertine king that England has ever known, a man whose insatiable thirst for fleshly pleasures shocked even the relaxed standards of his era. But how did Charles II become the very symbol of royal depravity? Why was his court known as the most immoral place in Europe? To understand the forbidden history of this scandalous monarch, we must return to the beginning and uncover the sordid secrets he concealed behind the British crown. Charles was born on the 29th of May, in the year 1630, the son of Charles I and Henrietta Maria of France. His childhood was marked by the English Civil War, a bloody conflict that would culminate with his father's execution in the year 1649. This traumatic event would forever shape the personality of Charles, who grew up seeing royal power as something fragile, and life as something to be seized and enjoyed to its fullest. During his years of exile in France, Charles was exposed to a court far more libertine than the English one. The court of Louis XIV was renowned for its romantic intrigues and the sexual freedom it permitted the nobility. It was there that Charles learned that royal power could be used not just to govern, but also to satisfy every carnal desire imaginable. When he returned to England in the year 1660 to assume the throne in the Restoration, Charles brought with him the dissolute habits he had acquired in France. At 30 years old, he was a tall, dark, and extremely charismatic man, with a seemingly unquenchable thirst for women. What began as discreet affairs quickly escalated into a public scandal that would shock all of Europe. His first major controversy arose with Barbara Villiers, later the Countess of Castlemaine. The affair began even before Charles was officially married. Barbara was a married woman, but that did not stop the king from making her his official mistress. She was beautiful, intelligent, and completely devoid of moral scruples, the perfect combination to become the royal favorite. The scandal intensified when Charles married Catherine of Braganza in 1662. Instead of dismissing Barbara, the king had the audacity to appoint her as a lady-in-waiting to his own wife. Poor Catherine, a devout Catholic Portuguese princess, was forced to coexist daily with her husband's mistress. Barbara was not content to be merely a mistress. She craved power, influence, and wealth. Using her privileged position, she began to interfere in matters of state, selling public offices and influencing important appointments. Her extravagances cost the royal treasury a fortune, yet Charles seemed unable to deny her anything. The king's behavior became even more scandalous when he began to accumulate mistresses simultaneously. While keeping Barbara as his official favorite, he started affairs with dozens of other women. Actresses, ladies of the court, nobles' wives, and servants. No woman was beyond his reach. The English court transformed into a veritable royal harem. One of his most famous mistresses was Nell Gwyn, a theater actress who became the darling of the English people. Unlike Barbara, Nell was of humble origins and had a sense of humor that amused the king. She prided herself on being the Protestant whore, in opposition to Charles's Catholic mistresses. Her relationship with the king lasted nearly 15 years, and she gave him 2 illegitimate sons. But Nell was just one among many. Louise de Keroualle, a French noblewoman sent by Louis XIV as a spy, became another long-lasting favorite. Hortense Mancini, niece of Cardinal Mazarin, scandalized London with her bisexual affairs. Catherine Sedley, a poet's daughter, was known for her sharp intellect and witty tongue, which rivaled the king's own. What shocked contemporaries most was not just the number of mistresses, but the brazen way Charles paraded his licentiousness. He appeared publicly with his favorites, took them to official events, and even allowed them to influence major political decisions. Queen Catherine was constantly humiliated, forced to smile and accept the presence of her rivals in her own court. The financial cost of Charles's excesses was astronomical. He spent fortunes on gifts for his mistresses, maintained luxurious residences for them and their children, and distributed titles of nobility as if they were candy. Barbara Villiers received the title of Duchess of Cleveland and a lifetime pension of £4,700 a year, a gigantic sum for the time. Charles's illegitimate children were spread throughout England. The king officially acknowledged 14 illegitimate children, but rumors suggested there were at least 20 more he never claimed. These children received noble titles and important positions at court, creating a new class of bastard aristocracy that rivaled the traditional nobility in power. The Duke of Monmouth, Charles's son with Lucy Walter, became particularly problematic. As the eldest illegitimate son, some viewed him as a legitimate heir to the throne, especially since Charles never had legitimate children with Queen Catherine. This situation created a dynastic crisis that would eventually lead to the Monmouth Rebellion years later. Charles's debauchery was not limited to official mistresses. Accounts from the era describe regular orgies at the palace, where the king participated in group sexual activities with multiple partners. These parties were known as intimate gatherings and took place in the king's private apartments, far from the eyes of the official court. The king's behavior influenced the entire English aristocracy. The Puritan morality that had dominated during the period of Oliver Cromwell was completely abandoned. The court became a place where extramarital affairs were not just tolerated, but expected. Noble husbands competed for their wives to become royal mistresses, seeing it as a way to gain political influence. The expenses for his mistresses contributed significantly to the kingdom's financial problems. Charles was constantly in debt, forced to ask Parliament for money and even to accept secret bribes from Louis XIV of France. A substantial portion of this money was spent maintaining the lavish lifestyle of his favorites. The situation reached a peak of scandal when Charles began to involve himself with increasingly younger women. Catherine Sedley was young, just over 20 years old, when she became his mistress. Other partners were even younger, leading to whispers about the king's predatory behavior. The age difference between Charles and his latest conquests became increasingly stark as he grew older. The religious aspect of Charles's licentiousness also caused controversy. As the head of the Anglican Church, he was supposed to be a model of Christian morality. Instead, his personal life was a complete contradiction to religious teachings. Many clergymen refused to preach in his presence, and sermons on morality became a rarity at court. English foreign policy was also affected by the king's excesses. Louise de Keroualle, his French mistress, was suspected of influencing Charles in favor of France. Diplomatic documents from the time show that Louis XIV consciously used Charles's mistresses as a channel of political influence, turning the royal bed into an instrument of international espionage. As Charles aged, his excesses began to take their toll. By his 50s, he showed clear signs of physical decline. Rumors circulated about venereal diseases, although they were never officially confirmed. His appearance, once considered handsome, began to deteriorate rapidly. During his final years, Charles tried to moderate his behavior, but it was too late. The damage to the monarchy's reputation was done. Satirical pamphlets circulated through London, ridiculing the Libertine king and his broodmares, as his mistresses were cruelly called. The royal dignity had been irreparably stained. The death of Charles in 1685 brought an end to an era of unprecedented excess in English history. His final words about Nell Gwyn revealed where his true priorities lay, not in the salvation of his soul or the good of his kingdom, but in the well-being of one of his many mistresses. The legacy of Charles II is complex and controversial. On one hand, he restored the monarchy after years of the Puritan Republic and presided over a period of cultural rebirth known as the Restoration. On the other hand, his rampant licentiousness set dangerous precedents regarding the limits of royal behavior. His 14 officially recognized illegitimate children created a new, parallel dynasty that would influence English politics for generations. Many of the most important noble families in modern England descend directly from the mistresses of Charles II, literally making him the grandfather of a significant portion of the British aristocracy. The Libertine court that Charles created profoundly influenced English culture. The Restoration theatre, with its sexually explicit comedies, reflected the relaxed moral environment the king had established. Authors like John Dryden and William Wycherley wrote plays that would have been unthinkable during the Puritan period. Today, more than 300 years after his death, Charles II remains a fascinating and disturbing figure in British history. He proved that even absolute kings are subject to human weaknesses, but he also demonstrated how limitless power can completely corrupt a person. His story serves as a reminder that the monarchy, no matter how divine it proclaims itself to be, is wielded by human beings, with all the vices and passions of human nature. Charles II transformed the English throne into a bed and the royal court into a brothel, leaving a legacy of scandal that echoes to this day in the most sordid pages of British history.